how things are going right now, it's just such a gift to be able to take a step back, look at all of the processes and the client experience and change things up. These are roadmaps, right? Nobody said that we can't change anything. We always want to make things better, more efficient, and streamlined.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Loon.
I'm Toni.
Welcome back to our show. So today we are solo, just me and you, Toni.
Fun.
Let's just do a really quick recap because,
Okay.
you know, I just saw you like 10 minutes ago. But for the audience that are just tuning in right now,
Yes.
how are you finding the market?
This is a
It
good
sounds
question.
exhausting.
No, I actually love it. I love it. So the first part of the year, all the way up until I would say mid-April, it felt very frenzied. That would be my word to describe the market. It was a frenzy. So a lot of production, a lot of absorption, lots of new listings coming on. If you were representing buyers, very difficult to get them anything. So to be honest, I am enjoying the little bit of the shift. We're still productive. We're still selling homes, but it's not as frenzied. It's not a rush to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row before going to market, those kinds of things.
So those listeners who are not part of the Vancouver market, there is no longer a rush. It's a bit, I wouldn't say it's
not
a buyer's
slow.
market at
It's
all.
not
It's not
slow.
slow. It's a little bit flatter. There has been another rate hike
2 days ago.
by what is it, a half a point?
Half a point.
And so the borrowing power has really decreased for a lot of the buyers. And as you know, our city is already unaffordable. So we decided that a lot of our listeners here are new agents who got signed up and they're like, whoa, you know, they're seeing all the activity that's happening. They're leaving their previous careers to join real estate thinking it's going to be easy. They're going to ride and coast along. But guess what?
Those markets always change, my friends.
So we've had a few people reach out to us the last couple of months and asking us how to lead generate. And I know that for those of you who've been in the game long enough, that there is never a steady long-term market. It does shift and it's on a macro level, macro reasons. There's issues with Ukraine and gas issues and
Cost of
inventory
living in general.
issues. And it's never been a real ebb and flow. I would probably say that I've been in now, this would be my third time kind of seeing it as more of like a kind of a steady pace.
Yeah, I was going to say
Moment.
four.
4
Around
4.
4, yeah.
So yeah, in a market that's more balanced, it's obviously way more important that you got to up your game, increase on your productivity, your time blocking, your measurements of expenses.
Yes.
You may have to cut back a little. So today's episode, we're going to give you some quick tips on how to stay profitable during this cycle.
Okay. Tip number 1 has to do with most people's favorite topic. It's lead generation and lead follow-up. So in transitioning markets where it's not necessarily as easy to get a home sold, if you're a listing realtor primarily, it is very important that you're talking to more people. If you in your business have looked at how many, what your gross profit should be for the year, when the market changes, you need to talk to more people. So basically, we have a few tips here. There's a number of ways to do this, okay? So when I say lead generation, lead follow-up, that has to do specifically with prospecting. For those of you that listen to our show, you guys know that I love prospecting, primarily because it is free to do it. It does cost time, but it's not some kind of upfront cost where you have to pay for leads that might not convert. So I like the fact that it's free. I like the fact that you can have meaningful conversations with people about real estate right away rather than speaking about something else first, right? Let's just get to the nitty gritty of everything. And three, it's very easy. There's homes all over the place. So this wouldn't necessarily work for something like a condo because you can't get into the building to knock on the doors. But there's other things that you can do. If you leave your home, there's probably a detached area of homes right nearby. You can knock on any of those doors.
So you're saying these are new leads.
So yeah, there's in order to talk to more people, there are a variety of lead sources that you can speak to. I'll backtrack a bit because the first one that you want to focus on, especially if you've been a realtor for a while, is your center of influence past clients, right? Because those are people that have already done business with you. I'm imagining that they had a great experience. They already know and like you. And it makes sense to take care of those people first. It can be as simple as checking in to see how they're doing. If they've purchased a home, you want to make sure that they were settled in okay. And real estate automatically comes up if they know someone who's thinking of buying or selling. It's like a natural progression in the conversation from people that you already know and have done business with.
So can you give our listeners an example of something that you've recently done with your sphere of influence in terms of connecting with them? What if like they've bought, it's been, I don't know, 7-8 months, but you kind of want to check in. How do you open up that dialogue so that it doesn't feel like you're asking for the referral, that you're bothering them too much? Because obviously that's more of an internal mindset that they have to get over, is that they're bothering someone.
Yes. I love this question so much. So we've actually changed the touch points for clients because in putting yourself in the client's shoes, purchasing a new property and moving in and having that change is such a huge experience, isn't it? And there's so many things that can happen after moving day when you've given the keys. They're exploring their new home, possibly a new neighborhood. As humans, it would make sense that you check in with them on a human level to make sure that they're happy and content with this change in their life that they've made, which is what my team and I do. But to answer your question, so the touch points happen very early. We make sure that the move's gone okay. There's a call a week after to see how they've settled in. There's a call a month later just to see how they're finding the home, like those kinds of things, right? And so as time goes on, if you have the mindset of you're genuinely wanting to know how your client is doing in this big life change that they've made, it doesn't feel internally like a struggle, like, oh, I'm going to ask for business and it's something self-serving. It's not at all if you look at it in the mindset and in the way that you are wanting to genuinely know how your client is doing and how this change has been for them.
Okay. So be more specific, getting to the action plan. Are you texting them, phoning them, emailing them, visiting them?
I'm old school. So I think it always depends on how the client likes to be communicated with. There are certain clients that only like text messaging. That's fine. You adjust. You text message them to check in. I do prefer telephone calls though. If they don't pick up, because people are busy, I get it. You leave a message. Leave the voicemail to say, hey, listen, I'm just calling to check and see how you guys are enjoying your new home. How are the kids doing at the new school? Have you found your new community of people nearby? This is a genuine thing to be concerned about and ask about. And I can say, if you go about the conversation that way, 99.99% of the time, you will hear back from your client. They will call you back and not just text message you, that you'll get a call.
So I just want to reference back to Cam Walker's episode last week or 2 weeks ago.
CRMs.
Or 3 weeks ago now. Because that CRM, super simplified, but all it does is give you call prompts, reminders to contact your client. And we asked Cam one question: how do you open up that conversation? How do you feel like? His reply was, well, you talk to them like they're your friend.
And they are. They're people that you want the best for.
Right.
Yeah.
And just find some common ground. It doesn't necessarily need to be about real estate.
No.
It can just be something as simple as, hey, just wanted to let you know that I'm having a picnic. Like, why don't you come by the park with your kids and maybe they can get to know each other,
Yeah.
play, you know.
It
So.
can be anything. I think as long as you're coming from a good place and you're getting in touch with your current sphere and past clients, you're really not going to go wrong.
All right.
So we're talking about lead sources and lead generation. Obviously, if you come from the place of, okay, you need to talk to more people because it is a numbers game to possibly have more access to more real estate transactions, you might have called your COI and past clients, but what about the groups outside of that? There's people outside of that. If you really want to expand, you have to be talking to people that possibly you've never talked to before. I say to my kids all the time, a stranger is a friend that you haven't met yet, with some caveats, of course, but that's kind of the mentality to go along with the prospecting and the lead generation. So if you listen to any real estate coaches like Mike Ferry, Tom Ferry, they're going to basically outline the same thing, which is you could contact expired listings or terminated listings that are no longer under contract.
And just double check that they have not been relisted.
Of course. Right. And also, guys, just a reminder, you can't call the cancel protected ones, of course. You're not allowed to call those. But just even having a conversation about, do you still want to sell your home? You do? Great. And finding out what the motivation behind, I mean, there's disclosures and things, but what the motivation behind it is, and if you can be of service to helping these people who are unsuccessful the first time.
I would also say that it's also safe to ask, why do you think it did not sell?
Yeah, and most of the time it's the market. It maybe needed a new marketing strategy. Sometimes they'll say whatever. I mean, sometimes they'll say it's the agent. It's not always the case.
Would you say you would still approach a listing that was $250,000 over asking, like over what the market was?
Well, so yes, I do, to be honest, actually. I do, but I would go in with the mindset, no, it's one of two things. One, either they weren't coached properly in terms of setting the price with the current market conditions, which would be a possible realtor thing, or maybe not right alignment with the realtor and client. And the second thing could be that they're just really out of touch with reality for the market and they want to be greedy. So they're not a motivated seller, in which case we wouldn't work with them. Are you kind of the same vein of thought for that?
Well, I honestly don't attack or approach expired or terminated listings. It's just way too busy for me. But at the same time, if I was to answer that question, I would say yes, it's still an opportunity to keep them on their minds when they are ready, and maybe when they're more realistic, maybe when they're more motivated.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting? Most of the people that are listed a few $100K over, even in a busy seller's market, are actually the for sale by owners. It's not typically the expired listings.
Right. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why they listed it. So
That's right.
It could have been they needed to move assets around, equity around. Maybe there's a little bit of stress and tension inside the home, and they need to split up and they need the money. So maybe giving it a shot. Maybe their perception of a realtor was negative.
Could be.
And so maybe you can kind of change that conversation in their mind.
Exactly. So we talked about expired terminated listings. For sale by owners are a different ballgame as well.
What are some ways to find or source for sale by owners? This is a good
question. And I actually want to say something too. I don't call all of these people anymore either all the time, because I mostly focus on our center of influence and past clients, because we have so many now. And I love our clients and talking to those people. But I will say that if you are a new licensee, this is the cheapest, fastest way to get business. So that's why I like to bring it up.
Also the do not call list.
Yes.
So because you probably do more outbound calls than I do.
Okay.
The do not call list is typically their name and their home phone number. Does it list their cell number as well?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But am I allowed to be honest?
And most people, number one, how often are they reporting it?
I don't think. So this is the thing. I used to check the do not call list all the time. I might get a reprimand here, but I'll just be real. I used to check it all the time. It's fear paralyzing if you have to check it all the time. So when I was making calls in the past, I just stopped checking it. Generally, I know I'm not technically allowed to say that. It's not to harass people. It's to ask a question. And if there ever was anybody, which was very rare, that they were actually on the list and I had mistakenly called, if you're apologetic about it from a genuine place, like, of course, we don't want to harass people. They just let it go. For new realtors that have never actually taken a listing before, this can be something, in addition to what we've already discussed, and obviously talking to your center of influence, where you have the ability, it's like looking for opportunities. Everything is an opportunity. So if you go in with the mindset of, hey, I'm going to go into this area, just knock on random doors and see if anyone's considered selling their home. It's a simple thing, right? It's a question and a door knock. And I can't tell you how many times in my experience, if you say, hey, I'm just, my name's Toni Singh. I'm with Bel Air Realty in Vancouver. And I was wondering, have you thought about selling your home? Sometimes they just say yes. It's not difficult. They'll say yes. And then you ask another question. That's very interesting. When would that might be? Do you have a realtor to represent you? Most of the time it's like, no. So would you have the appointment?
Wow. Okay. So your two opening lines are, have you ever considered selling your home?
It depends on the market, and it depends on what type of prospecting that I'm doing.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, when I was new, I didn't have business. So I would just go to a neighborhood, knock on the doors, and start talking to people.
So there are some people that are really scared and they freeze. They don't know what to talk about.
Yeah.
What kind of preparation are you doing before what's your plan of attack? Like, are you already familiar with the values of the homes that you're going to? Because are they expecting an evaluation right on the spot?
No. So there is a process. I mean, okay, so today's topic is getting more business in a changing market. That's actually more detailed. You could go into that forever, but no. The goal of the initial prospecting when you're speaking to new people is to find alignment, see if they actually are interested in selling. If they are, you would set an appointment for 1 or 2 days time, whatever their timeline is. But I generally cut it in half. And for that appointment, before going on the appointment, you will pre-qualify the listing appointment. This is essential because in changing markets, you only really want to list people and help them if they are motivated sellers. Some people are just, they're not going to sell at this current place in time. So it doesn't make sense to take the listing because, Jenny, as you know, it can cost a lot of money, time and marketing expenses up front in order to list a home and get it sold. So in a changing market, if you've got 10 listings, you take in 10 and they're not motivated, you're out $10,000 at least. Or, what
right.
I mean.
So going back to the plan of attack. So before you leave your home, leave your car, you don't know the value of those homes yet based on your route. All you're really doing is just trying to get the appointment.
So yes and no. There's no right or wrong way of doing it, but I would say before you go into door knock an area, it would probably be prudent, especially if you're a new licensee, to look at the recent sales before going to have a general idea, because of course they're going to want to know what their home is worth, and that's also why you would set the appointment. But you can give general information from a knowledge base.
And how do you get yourself in through the door, even though it's not an official appointment CMA sit down yet? How do you get yourself through the door so that you can at least walk through to see if there's been any renovations, illegal modifications?
This is a good question. So female realtors especially, I normally don't enter through the door on that first meeting because you don't know who these people are. We just talked about safety. We had a question in our last episode, yes, about safety and female realtors. So there's two ways to answer this. When you do the pre-qualification, which is before the actual listing appointment, you would actually ask, are there any upgrades? Are there any things that, you know what I mean? You can ask the question. You'll get a general sense anyhow. And then when you go on the listing appointment, you would you'd give a range anyhow, right? Because sometimes people will say, oh yeah, we did new flooring. Well, it was 10 years ago and it's scuffed because they maybe have a dog or two, right? So no, it's not new. But the general premise here in terms of growing your business and staying profitable in a changing market is, again, bringing it back to talking to more people and getting the listing and working with more people that you didn't know before. So there is a way to do that. You can go in person or over the phone, Jenny, because you mentioned calling.
Yeah.
Both are great, and whatever method you decide to use, just go with that. Whatever you're comfortable with. The last thing I was going to mention in relation to lead gen is if you really want to maximize talking to as many people as possible and you're looking for the variety in practicing your skills and reaching more people, you can do the circle prospecting, which is a combination of all of these together.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, what that looks like is there's different ways to do it. You could pull 3 of the most recent expired listings in an area, make sure that they're not relisted, make sure they're not cancel protected, and you would plot them out on a map to see where those homes are. You would hit those 3 expires, check to see if there are any FSBOs nearby as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would, in addition to hitting the 3 expires, also door knock cold in between if you're doing the
Gotcha.
knocking in between.
Okay.
But it's a good way to integrate everything together rather than just focusing on one type.
Okay.
Because the conversion ratios for how many people you would need to talk to for the just listed, just sold calls or door knocking is about 100 to 1.
I see.
Meaning that you would need to typically, now this is not, it's an average, okay? So I've had it happen where you knock on the second one, yeah, they want a list. But typically it's going to be 100 door knocks or 100 calls to 1 appointment.
Okay. Okay. So going back to the plan of attack again, sorry to go back to that.
No.
But like what hours of the day are you setting yourself up to walk the route? And how many houses or how many streets do you hit in that day?
So old me that used to do this all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you got to where you are. So let's just say there's a new agent who's really eager, don't know any other way to get new business but to door knock.
Okay. So I wouldn't do what I did because I don't think it's actually healthy. It's the overachiever thing.
Okay.
There were times in the snow that I would door knock 250 homes.
In one day?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know.
How many
But
hours did that take?
It was, I mean, it depends because, so you can do it a variety of ways. You could knock 250 homes or you could just base it on like talking to 50 people in person. Because normally if you knock 250 homes, not everyone's going to be home.
Right. Okay.
I used to go in the snow on purpose because most people were home.
Okay.
But to really answer your question, Mike Ferry and a lot of the other real estate trainers will say as long as you're doing the activity, it's very important, right, to make sure that your business stays steady.
Right.
So if you're do what works best for your schedule. We used to have a role play at 7:30 a.m. in the morning and then go straight into prospecting from 8 a.m. until 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
That used to be on the phone for a bit, and then if you needed a break, you could go walking in person just to switch it up. When I was a new realtor, I did it wrong. I was too exhausted. So I would do it whenever I could. I was working on site. I would go before the site opened at 12. And then after site was done at 5, I would go door knocking until it was dark. I don't suggest doing that because safety reasons and everything too.
Right.
So I think as long as you're being consistent and doing at least a 1 to 2 hour time block in your schedule, you'll definitely see the reward.
Good.
Is how I want to answer that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Next part.
Wow. Yeah. So another way to really reconnect with your clients and make it automated, make it a very good workflow is reassessing and upgrading your processes and systems. And I know that it's one of those things that we're not really good at. It's tedious. Don't want to do the work because you're not really talking to anyone. And I think often it gets kind of put on the back burner when you're just busy doing deals.
Yeah.
And so doing a full audit of your process and the workflow will, in the long term, really help you in your business.
For sure. And in frenzied markets, I'm guilty of it too. You're working in the business in those type of markets, right? Not on the business. So how things are going right now, it's just such a gift to be able to take a step back, look at all of the processes and the client experience and change things up. These are roadmaps, right? Nobody said that we can't change anything. We always want to make things better, more efficient, and streamlined.
Right. So there's a couple of workflow online software systems that a few of our guests have mentioned.
That's right.
I think Zahid had mentioned one.
Zapier.
Zapier. I've actually adopted Monday.com.
I've heard of that one too.
Oakland
Good.
Northwest. It's worked really, really well into onboarding agents and also outbound calling agents. Trello has been a really good one as well. So I think those are all really good platforms. At the end of the day, it's visually Monday.com looked really good to use for me, so that's why I ended up using it. I do pay a very, very, very small fee for it just because I have some of the upgraded tools.
I mean, if it works, that's okay.
Yeah. And then Asana is one that I know that another agent has used as well. But you're only as good as the system, so you have to put those automations and prompts. Spend a half a day to organize all of that.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do it too is just from people often get overwhelmed, right? It's like, well, what is the process and who am I? So look at it maybe from even the opposite perspective. You're the client instead of, if I look at it from the realtor perspective, I'm like, yeah, these are great. But it doesn't actually take into account where your client is coming from and the emotional things they might experience when they're listing a property. They've got an accepted offer on a property, then there's subject removal, getting it sold, and then purchasing, right? So I like looking at it from that way. I'm doing it again. We've done this before, and I always learn something new. I'm like, this could be done better.
Well, you hired Darcy. She was one of the podcast guests, and I think she's going to try to get on as well in July. I spoke to her recently.
Okay.
So can you just say maybe one thing that after her evaluation on your systems?
Everything's attached.
Everything is attached.
So everything is communicating with one another. If I put it in one spot, it goes everywhere.
So a cloud,
it's saving time. No, I always use cloud. How do I explain? All of the main components that we use for communication and these kinds of things are all speaking to each other now.
Okay.
So it's a positive thing because it creates less work in terms of duplicating work. If you have a closing for it's like it's there. Everybody knows what has to be done. But the downside is that if you accidentally
forget to input it in or something,
or if you accidentally delete a record, it will delete everywhere.
So
that actually gives me anxiety. But it does work really well.
Is there a system that you're using or like how did
we're gonna have to have her on because she basically helps you do it, but I'm not a tech person, so I wouldn't have been able to.
Okay, so you didn't have to adopt any new software. It was like maybe triggering something on your phone.
And actually, that's right. And actually, my systems are a bit different than most of the agents she works with because we integrated in what I was using.
Okay.
So that was really helpful,
right?
Because you can waste time learning a new system.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that during this time, if you're not working with a lot of buyers or a lot of sellers, is to educate yourself. I remember when I was just starting the business, I signed up for like 10 coaching emails to come into my inbox. I saved and clipped newspaper articles and how to word comments and property listings, and saved a lot of postcards because I was interested in other people's branding style. So, and as well, I don't think I have to renew it for another 2 years, but I'm already done all my credits, my PDP courses, plus, because now I'm a managing broker.
And it's a thirst for learning.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. This is a great time and revamp everything.
The reason why we're suggesting this is because the more knowledge you have, the more confident you are in talking about these type of markets where essentially the market is the buyer and the seller. It's not what happens. It's whatever happens outside is whatever happens outside, but essentially they still have to move on with their life regardless of what's happening.
That's right. Yeah. Last thing I think I would like to mention here is, and Zahid actually mentioned this in his episode, one of our mortgage brokers. I loved this though, reaching out to supporting industry professionals. Good time for that too, on a number of levels. Number one, obviously it's always great to connect with like-minded business professionals in the same industry. And number two, if you're both servicing the same mutual clients during any point of a real estate transaction, You want to make it streamlined, and sometimes different businesses' processes don't account for that unless you're having the conversation. So I'm also doing that again right now because we have a little bit more time. Yeah.
Good. Thirdly, during this time is
Okay.
matching up your business cost and your cost of living.
Yeah. So I guess we kind of talked about that before too, right? Like if we were newer licensees, what would we tell our past self? I mean, it is important to know the numbers. And I think the easiest way to do that is obviously you want to know how much it costs you to live without starting a new business because you'd need to at least make that. And then you also want to know how much it costs to for each property listing, each property sale, because there's costs involved with that, right? But yeah, go ahead.
What do you recommend for someone to how to keep track of that? Are you using something simple like an Excel, Google sheet, or even QuickBooks?
I use Excel, but I have always loved Excel, and you can get really crafty with some of the inputs. So depending on what numbers you want to look at, very easy to do if you work with Excel well. I like to, and I've only done this actually more in recent years because I'm like, shoot, we sold a lot of things, but what's our actual net? And sometimes you might forget that one small thing that you pay for, it has to be integrated in. So in these changing markets, of course, you want to get a handle on expenses, as you always should as an entrepreneur. I think what it comes down to is really being realistic about, again, what your current costs are. Probably also taking into account what your expectation is in terms of what kind of growth you want to have. And then putting it somewhere like in an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet, whatever's going to work for you so that you can actually see the numbers. Very easy to put in. So for example, each month, depending on how many transactions you have, you would probably want to start tracking, if you're not already. New realtors won't probably do this yet, but you'd want to track how many listings you've sold, how many buyer sales you've had. This is also a great time to do your CRM at the same time. So you're not duplicating work.
Yep.
You'll want to know what the gross commission calculated would be on each of these properties. And then you'll also, based on some of these actions, want to create what your actual net's going to be when you minus things like brokerage expenses, marketing expenses, taxes are important. People forget about taxes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A lot, right?
Yeah.
So this is important to look at. And what better time, and again, it's not a downward market actually, folks. It's still very active, but we do get a little bit of a breather to look at these other things that we should be aware of.
Yeah, and I'm not an accountant, so I'm not trying to make any recommendations here, but you and I were Personal Real Estate Corporated.
Yes.
We're PREX. And generally what I've heard is that once you start making more than what you spend, that's when you should should protect your income. By doing that, you're going into a corporate rate of about 13.5%, if that's
right.
Is that correct? So you're only really just paying yourself the amount that you need to live on your personal income.
Yes.
So just something to think about so that you can remain more profitable. And as well, for me, by being able to analyze where your costs and expenses are going, your productivity will go up because you're going to just focus on the tools and the sources that are actually feeding you the real income.
Yeah, and I think if you really want to expand and grow your business, you can only do it when you're starting from knowing where you're coming from, right? That's how you know where you're going to go. So, in closing, we hope that you guys found this episode interesting. There's no right or wrong way to do these things. These are just some suggestions I think that have worked for us in our personal businesses over the years, and just want to share it.
Thank you,
probably,
guys.
yeah.
Well, actually, one more tip I want to offer. Actually,
Yes.
this was really effective when I did open houses or just listed or just sold. I went around the neighborhood and invited all the other neighbors, even though I knew they were just kind of curious, but it was more of an invitation. Hey guys, I just listed a house around the corner from you.
Yep.
if you just have some time between 2 to 4, come by and take a look.
It's like a good rendition of a just listed, just sold, but an invitation as well.
Exactly.
That's
And you kind of show, that potential seller that you're putting in a lot of effort to try to get as much exposure to for that listing.
Good tip.
Thank you. And in summary, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Once again, rate us 5 stars, write us a review, and we love your feedback. And please do share this episode for anyone you think needs all these tips.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.